Do you think secrets should ever be kept? I'd love to hear your opinion in the comments. I used to think I had control, that I could live two lives and keep them separate like oil and water. But secrets have a way of bubbling to the surface, no matter how deep you bury them. And when mine came out, it shattered everything. My family, my identity, my very sense of who I was. If you're reading this, you might already be judging me. Or maybe you're curious, wondering what it's like to juggle two lives. Let me tell you, it's a thrill at first. But it's also a slow, creeping poison. You don't notice how much damage you're doing until it's too late. The story begins 7 years ago, but the cracks in my character go much further back. I was married to Emma, my college sweetheart, the woman who had stood by me through every triumph and failure. She was steady, kind, and endlessly patient, almost to a fault. Together we had Jake, our 6-year-old son, who had my eyes and her love of books. On paper, I had it all: a family, a stable career, a life that others envied. But there was a part of me that felt unseen, unheard. I told myself I was just another cog in the machine of suburban life. And then I met Sarah. It was at a work conference, one of those overnight trips where everyone pretends to network but really just wants to drink. Sarah was different from anyone I'd ever met. Bold, unpredictable, magnetic. She teased me about my boring tie and laughed at jokes I didn't even realize I was making. "What's your story, Mr. Perfect?" she asked, leaning closer over the table, her eyes sparkling. "Not much of one," I replied, feeling a strange mix of flattery and guilt. She raised an eyebrow. "I don't believe you. Everyone has a story. Some are just better at hiding it." Looking back, I think she saw right through me from the start. What began as harmless flirtation quickly spiraled into something more. By the end of the weekend, I wasn't just a husband and father. I was Sarah's lover. At first, I told myself it was just a fling, but Sarah had a way of making me feel alive, like the version of myself I'd lost somewhere along the way. When she told me she was pregnant, I panicked. I thought about confessing everything to Emma, but instead I doubled down on the lie. I rented an apartment in the city and created a second life where I was Sarah's partner and the father of our daughter, Lily. I lived like that for years, splitting my time between two families, always careful to keep them apart. I became an expert at lying, about work trips, about late meetings, about why I couldn't answer the phone. But no matter how careful you are, lies leave traces. "Why do you always smell like a different shampoo when you come home?" Emma asked one night, her tone casual but her eyes sharp. "Hotel soap," I said with a laugh, planting a kiss on her forehead to mask my racing heart. Emma wasn't the type to pry, but she wasn't blind either. Over time, her questions grew more pointed, her gaze more searching. I brushed off her suspicions, telling myself she'd never dig deep enough to find the truth. But I underestimated her and the weight of my own lies. It was a Tuesday evening when the house of cards came crashing down. I came home to find Emma sitting at the kitchen table, my phone in her hand. I don't know what she saw, maybe a message from Sarah or a photo of Lily, but the look on her face told me she knew everything. "Who is Sarah?" she asked, her voice steady but brittle like a thread pulled too tight. My stomach dropped. "Emma, Don't lie to me," she cut in, her voice rising. "Who is she? And why does Jake think he has a sister named Lily?" I froze. Jake, he must have overheard one of my phone calls to Sarah. The ground beneath me felt like it was crumbling, and for the first time I couldn't find the words to talk my way out of it. She's the mother of my other child," I said finally, my voice barely audible. The silence that followed was unbearable. Emma stared at me, her expression a mixture of shock, betrayal, and something I couldn't quite place. Pity, maybe? Then she stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Pack a bag," she said coldly. "I want you out by the time Jake gets home from soccer practice." "Emma, please," I begged, reaching for her hand. "Let me explain." "Explain what?" she snapped, yanking her hand away. "That you've been lying to me for years? That you have another family? There's nothing you can say that will fix this." I left that night, but the nightmare was far from over. Sarah was furious when she found out about Emma. "You lied to me too," she hissed, her eyes blazing. "You made me think I was the only one." "I never wanted to hurt anyone," I said weakly. "Well, congratulations," she spat. "You've hurt everyone. And you think I want to be your dirty little secret?" she shouted, her voice shaking with rage. For weeks I lived in a haze of guilt and loneliness, trying to piece together a life from the wreckage. Emma refused to take my calls. Jake wouldn't look me in the eye during our court-ordered visits. Now I live alone in a small apartment, far from the house I once shared with Emma, and the city where Sarah and Lily live. I see Jake on weekends, but the boy who used to run into my arms now looks at me with cautious eyes. As for Lily, Sarah lets me visit her occasionally, but it's clear I'm just a visitor in her life. The moment that broke me came months later, during one of my visits with Jake. We were sitting on a park bench, and I handed him his favorite book, hoping to spark some kind of connection. "I don't want it," he said quietly, staring at the ground. "Why not?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Because it's from you," he said, his voice trembling. "And you're not who I thought you were." His words cut deeper than any punishment Emma or Sarah could have inflicted. I realized then that my lies hadn't just destroyed my relationships, they had destroyed the trust my children had in me.